Hi everyone, I'm Allie with the Potomac Bead Company, and I'm going to show you how to do this bracelet, which is featuring Montees and some check glass as well as SuperDuos. This bracelet, when we make it, we're going to be using a variety of materials. You want to make sure that you have SuperDuos, which for the SuperDuos in this example I've used the Capri Sapphire. I'm going to be using the Emerald Matte in the example that we're making. The 11 OC beads in both this bracelet and this one here, I've used the silver galvanized, so I'm going to use that one as well. I like the silver, it makes it have a nice rich look around the Montee. We're going to be using 8 OC beads. These 8 OC beads are the matte black AB seed beads. Here I've used the silver 8O, the galvanized silver 8 OC beads. Montee-wise, I used here the John Quill in the Montees, and it's an SS20 size of the Montees. For this bracelet, I'm going to be using the Amethyst Montee. And in addition to that, you need a clasp. I just have a small pewter toggle here. We have lots of pewter in stock, and pewter is a great option to use on your bracelets because it's not going to turn and not going to turn any colors. For my middle bead here, I need a 6mm bead, and I've chose to use a Champagne Luster 6mm round check glass bead. I'm keeping most of the products as the check glass and then the seed beads as well. In addition to my beads, I'm going to be using super glue to knot off my thread ends. I'm using some beading thread, and I'm going to be using some Wildfire beading thread in the crystal color or the white color. I'm going to be using 2 size 10 English beading needles, and then as always I like to work on a bead mat. It gives a nice easy surface to work at. This project will require 2 needles. Like I said, we're going to be going up and back the bracelet, which will allow us to reinforce the clasp and put on the clasp as we work on it. So as we get ready, we're going to put out little piles of everything. We're going to be working first with the 11 OC beads, the Montees, and our clasp. So you're going to get ready with those items. So getting ready, the first thing that I've done is I've taken 2 of my size 10 English beading needles, and that is on 5 feet of my beading thread. What that's going to do is give me enough thread for my whole project. I've put a needle on each end of the thread, and then I'm going to be working down at the base of the thread here at the bottom. To start off, I'm going to be adding my clasp, and to do that I'm going to add my clasp onto one side of my needle. On my right needle, I'm going to place 2 11 OC beads, and I'm going to place 2 on my left. Next, I'm going to grab just one of my 8 OC beads, and I'm going to put both needles through that same 8 OC bead. I'm going to push all of that then down to the very base of my project. So I have that just hanging out right there at the base. After the 8O, we're going to split the needles again. I'm going to put on 2 of my 11 O's on the right, and I'm going to put 2 of my 11 O's on my left needle. And I'm also going to let those drop down next to my base. If you have a cup button, it would be the same situation for the cup button. You're going to put on your cup button and 2 of your 11 O's, and then your 8 and 2 more 11 O's. Next, what we're going to do is a technique that I do in a lot of projects that you're using 2 needles. We're going to take one SuperDuo, and we're going to put one needle through one hole. We're going to put the other needle through the other hole. So that's one SuperDuo that both needles are going through. Again, the SuperDuos, if you haven't worked with them, they're a great 2-hole bead manufactured in the Czech Republic. And that's going to have our ending right there. Our pattern that we do next is going to continue throughout the whole base of the bracelet, because we're going to be making the base first, and then we're going to build on from there. So for the base, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on my right needle a seed bead, a SuperDuo, a seed bead, a SuperDuo, a seed bead, and a SuperDuo, followed by a seed bead. So you're going to have 4 seed beads with 3 of the SuperDuos in between. And I'm going to let that drop down on the right hand side needle. On the left hand side needle, I'm going to do the same thing, picking up with my left. I have my 3 SuperDuos that are all separated by 11 O seed beads. And I'm going to let that drop down next to my clasp and my start. Next, what I'm going to do to get almost a floral shape, which will help with this O shape here that's going to be around the bead, is I'm going to take one of my SuperDuos, again sharing the same SuperDuo. One needle goes through the right and one needle goes through the left. And I'm going to let that drop down onto my project. What we're going to do then when we add the middle is we're going to force that to sit open. So you have that design going on right now. Once you have that, we're going to get ready to add our Montee. So the very middle is quite simple. On each needle then I'm going to put a SuperDuo, or I'm sorry, an 11/0 seed bead. I'm going to pick up my Montee, and the Montees have an X pattern in the back if you haven't worked with them. You're going to put a Montee, one going to the right side and one going to the left side, and it's going to be crossing right as you work with it here. And I'm just going to pull my thread, and it's a fair amount of thread to keep in frame, so I apologize for that. The thread's going to be out of the frame a lot. And once you pull it down, the Montee is just going to sit right on the top, just like that. I'm going to pick up my needles again, and on the right hand needle I'm going to put one seed bead. On the left hand needle goes one seed bead. So there's always going to be a seed bead on either side of the Montees. After the Montee, I'm going back to my SuperDuo pattern, where I share one SuperDuo to 2 needles, let that drop down, and then split my needles again, one to the right, one to the left, and I'm going to do my pattern that I did back here. So I'm going to do my 3 SuperDuos on the right, 3 SuperDuos on the left, all separated by a seed bead, and then another SuperDuo at the top. That's going through both. So I get my 3 SuperDuos on, separated by my seed beads on the right, and then again the same thing is going to go on my left side. So we've got our 3 SuperDuos that are separated by our 11/0s. And I like this green and this purple together. It really is going to make the purple and the green both stand out. Once I have those 3 on either side, just like we did before, I'm going to put another SuperDuo on, again, sharing needles. There we go. I'm going to push that down next to our project, and we have our another little round section. You're most likely going to have between 7 and 8 of these little flower sections, depending on how wide you make it. That means you're going to have 6 to 7 or 5 to 7 Montees, depending on how long you want it to be. After this rotation again, I'm going to show how I do the Montees. I do an 11/0 on the right and the left, and let that drop down next to my project. When you have your project and you've got your first Montee on, it doesn't really matter which way the Montee is facing. As we continue all the Montees, we're going to make sure that they are sitting so that they are facing upward. To do that, when you put your Montee on, you want to make sure to start with one hole, going in one direction. Make sure that's flipped to the front before you put in the second needle. If it was flipped to the back, then you're not going to see that Montee. You're just going to see the silver backing. Give a nice tight pull, and then we're going to continue on with our pattern. So again goes those 8 SuperDuos, 3 on each side with 1 at the start and 1 at the bottom. I'm going to continue that pattern the whole length of my bracelet, and then we'll attach the clasp on the other side, and then we'll start coming back to decorate the middle. So I have 5 of my Montees on, and I decided to put the 6th on. 5 would fit me. I have a rather small wrist, so you want to do probably at least 5 if you're having like a 6.5 inch wrist. If you're going a little bit longer, you're going to need 6, maybe even 7 Montees, depending how long you go. On this last one, I'm going to show you how I'm doing it quickly to put those on each side. I think it's easier to work with 1 needle at a time rather than picking up 2. So what I do to keep it moving quickly, and dump a couple more of my SuperDuos out here, is I put on 5 of my SuperDuos on my right needle here. So I'm going to put 5 SuperDuos on, separated by my 11/0s. So I have my 11/0 on, get this needle here out of the way, and then I'm going to put 5 SuperDuos on at one time. What that's going to allow me to do is put them all on at once, and that way I don't have to stop to add them together and put them on. So I have them all separated by an 11/0 seed bead, and I have 5 of those SuperDuos on. I'm going to let them drop down next to my project, and I usually poke my right needle into my bead mat. That's going to keep it from poking me and coming up. Then when I grab my left, what I'm going to do is put on 1 seed bead. I'm going to grab the first SuperDuo that's already on there and go through the second hole. Then I'm going to put on 3 SuperDuos, separated by my 11s. And then I'm going to grab another SuperDuo right there at the end that I had already put on the right side. And an 11-0. So that way we match on either side now. And again, I have on here to make it about a 7-inch wrist. It will make it just a tiny bit smaller. You can see the middle flower sit up a little bit, so it is going to get a tiny bit smaller than what you measure when you're working on it. So when I'm working on it here, I'm measuring it. Again, this right here is about just under 7 inches because I'm going to be doing my ends here, so it'll make it shrink up a little bit. If you do want it longer, again, you're going to add probably that 7th Montee on. If you want to make it a little bit shorter, 5. I have it here at 6, which is going to make it about a standard size wrist. To put the other end on my clasp to go and match my loop here, if I was doing a regular old loop attaching to a button, whether or not it would be a gemstone button that we have or a cup button, I'd do it the same way. For the gemstone, or for the cup buttons, you're going to use about 26 of your 11-0s, and I would just put 26 11-0s right on my needle right now. Instead, I'm going to be using my toggle. So I want my ends to match. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a second 11-0 on each needle. So that way there's 2 at the end, just like at the beginning. I'm going to grab another one of my 8-0 beads here. And just like the start, we're going to share that 8-0, both needles going through it. Let that drop down next to my project. And then I'm going to get ready to put on my toggle bar. To put on my toggle bar, I want to do the same as the loop. You may even want to make it a little bit longer. That's up to you, especially if you are using a toggle, because sometimes it's hard to get that through. So I put on 2 beads on one of my needles, and I'm going to go through my toggle. On the other side, I'm going to put 2 more beads, same needle. And then I'm going to sew that same needle down through my 8-0 and down through the 2 11-0s. I'm going to pull nice and tight, and there I have my toggle bar on. With the other needle that I did not use at all, I'm going to go up through the seed beads and the clasp. This is going to reinforce it, making 2 times through, down through the 2 on the other side, as you can see, down through my 11, or down through my 8, and then I want to go through the 11s on the opposite side. So when you're looking at it here, my thread here comes off on the left side. I want this one to go down through the 8 and come out on the right side. There we go. Just make sure you don't get around that loop there. And I'm going to give a nice tight pull from both sides, and that's going to give you a nice tight anchor on that end of your toggle clasp. I'm going to flip it back over here so my Montees are in the front, so you can see the front of the bracelet. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be coming out of the 2 11-0 seed beads, and that way it's going to allow us to link on and to create our middle. When we do this on the other side too, when we're coming out, we're also going to be coming out those 2 11-0 seed beads to do the outside edge as we're working on it. So to start out here, what I want to do is I'm going to separate my needles and make one to the right and one to the left. Again, I'm coming out my 11-0 seed beads right before my first duo. I'm going to add the middle first. You could add the middle first, or you could add the sides. That's up to you. But to add the middle, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my needle and thread. We're going to go through the SuperDuo and through the first 11-0 right next to the duo and bring my needle out there. Needle on the other side is also going to come down that duo and down the 11-0. So what that's going to do is bring my 2 needles out the 11-0s in the middle of my project. So I have the 2 needles coming out the 11-0s in the middle. Here's where I'm going to add my middle, and again it is going to tighten it up just a tiny little bit. I'm using these check luster beads. They look kind of pearlesque. And on each side of the pearl, or the luster bead, I'm going to put an 11-0 seed bead through both needles. So coming out those 2 11-0s that are closest to the duo, I'm going to add an 11-0 through both needles. And then what I'm going to do is add both needles are going the same direction. I should have mentioned that. And then after that, I'm going to add same direction needles going through the 6mm bead, and then picking up another 11/0. We're going to go through that one. Needles going in the same direction. So basically the needles are going through the same direction on an 11/0, a 6mm, and an 11/0, and coming out there. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to separate my needles, and I'm going to go through the seed beads here next to the SuperDuos. Now that I have the one on the right done, I'm going to flip over here and do the same thing on the left. So again, just 5 seed beads go on. It's very simple. It's a very simple project, which is great. 5 seed beads go on, and then I'm going through on the left-hand side the 11/0, the SuperDuo, and the 11/0, and that's going to bring me out right next to the middle of my next little floral SuperDuo. What I can do then is I'm going to get ready to add my next middle bead. To add my next middle bead, on goes the 11/0 on both needles going in the same direction. Then I'm going to pick them up and put on my 6mm bead, and then another 11/0 through both needles. Some of the 11/0 holes are big enough that you can get both needles through depending on what size needles you're using. I like to use size 10, so you're going to get the 6mm through no problem, but the 11/0s you do have to drop down one needle at a time and then through the other needle. If you're using size 12 needles, you'll be able to drop that 11/0 down because they're skinnier. That's going to force that flower. You want to kind of push your SuperDuos off to the side. Make sure that the openings are to the outside. And that's going to force that flower opening. Again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate out my needles then after this point. And one goes to the left, one stays to the right. And we're going to get ready to create that little Montee trim. So going through the seed bead, the SuperDuo and the seed bead, we're coming out next to the Montee. And then we're going to put our 5 seed beads on each side. And it's just that same pattern going the whole way down next to the Montees. And you want to give a nice tight pull after each one because that's going to make that bead sit in there nice and tight. Again, if you don't want it to sit up a little bit, you can see it sitting up a little bit already. If you don't want it to sit up a little bit, just delete the 11/0s on the sides. Now I'm going to get ready to add my Montee trim, and I'm going to continue doing this the whole way down my bracelet. So just showing as I'm continuing on here all the little middles of my little, they kind of look like flowers or suns here. And again, I'm on the side of a Montee, so I'm just going to put on my 5 seed beads on my right needle. And once I've got those 5 on for my little diamond on the side, I'm going through the seed bead, through the SuperDuo, and through the seed bead, coming out the middle. Once I'm out the middle, I put on an 11/0, a 6, and an 11, so this is kind of the faster way that I'm doing it here. If I'm coming out the right side, I'm going to go into the left. I like to kind of crisscross my needles. I'm going to go in the SuperDuo and the 11s as well. I'm going to come out the side of my Montee. And then I'm going to grab the one on the right, or the left side, and I double that basically. So I'm going to go my 5 beads. I go into my 11 and my SuperDuo and my 11 on the left-hand side here. Just make sure they sit at a peak. Once I'm out this 11/0 on the side here, which my needle didn't want to grab, but once I'm out there, and I can go through the 11/0, my 6mm and my 11/0. Give a nice tight pull there as well. And then again, I was on the left, so I go to the right side. And this is kind of my faster way, again, just holding one needle at a time and not having to worry about the other one. And as you can see, sometimes you kind of have to give a little wiggle if you want to get it through all 3 of those beads at the same time. Once I'm out one of my 6mm, I give a nice tight pull, so I make sure that those 11/0s kind of drop down right in the middle there. So I'm at my last little middle 6mm bead here, and when my needles are coming out on this side, I'm going to take the needles up and reinforce the clasp. To do that, I want to take the needle on the right, and I'm going to go up through that 11/0, the SuperDuo, and the 2 11/0s on the right hand side. That needle then, I'm just going to let that hang out right there for a second. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the left. Again, up through the 11-0, the SuperDuo, and the 11-0. And come out both 11-0s if you can, wiggle it through. And again, I'm just going to give a nice tight pull, making sure that that bead sits nice and tightly in there. Get my thread here that I got caught. There we go. And I'm giving a nice tight pull on either side to make sure that my bead sits in there. And there we have that. And we have our base ready. So to reinforce the clasp and to get the needles where I need them to be now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up the 8-0, around the clasp, and I'm doing this with my right needle. So up the 8-0, through the 11s, through the clasp, down the 11s on the other side. And this is all with the right needle. So I went up the 8s, through 2 11s, through the clasp, back through the 8. And then I'm going to go through the 2 11s on the opposite side, and I want to come out right before the SuperDuo. That was all with my right needle, so I'm coming out on the left. The needle that was on the left, I'm going to do the same thing. Go up through my 8mm, up through my 2 seed beads, through the clasp. Don't get attached to those there. Down the 2 on the other side, down the 8mm bead, and then out the 2 seed beads to the right. So we're just basically doing the same thing on the right, same thing on the left. And where you want your needles to be, especially if you're using a different clasp, just pay attention to where they should be. So where our needle should be is coming out our 11-0s right before our first SuperDuo here at the end. Once they're there, we're going to come back and we're going to add the sides. On the side, the pattern is always going to be the same. Here's where you're going to want to drop and dump out some of your 8-0 seed beads. I'm going to get a little pile of my 8-0s. This is going to add some nice color contrast to my project. So for the sides, what I'm going to be doing is I'm adding an 11-0 and an 8-0. And I'm going to sew through the first hole of the open SuperDuo on the right hand side. When I'm coming out here, I'm going to put on an 11 and an 8mm or an 8-0, and I'm going to sew through the next SuperDuo. On this side, I'm going to do an 8-0 and an 11. So I did 11, 8-0. This side I do 8-0, 11. What that's going to do is make the 8-0s right there at the peak. When I get to the side here then, before my clasp, all I'm going to do, or before my Montee, is you don't have a ton of room in there. So all you're going to do is you're going to add one of your 11-0s. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up and go that whole line of my Montees. So when you're looking here, that 11-0 is going to sit right there on the side, and I'm going to go up and down all of those Montees, or all of those 11-0s on the side. So it's a little tricky to get your needle in there, but you're going to go needle in. You can kind of fold the project if you need to. And you need to get your needle in between there, in between the SuperDuo and the 11. And it's going to be easier for you guys because you don't have a piece of glass and an iPad sitting right in front of you. So I'm going up through the Montees, or up through the diamond on the Montee on that side. And that's going to allow my flower to lay right in there. I'm going to go down on the other side. And I'm going to come out my seed beads. Again, when I come out my seed bead, I'm going to have enough room at the start here to do my 11-0. And then I'm going to have my seed beads on the side. So the only time we put the extra seed bead is right there at the top. You can come down the whole right side if you want, and then come down the left. It's up to you. I'm just going to keep going on this one side. So I put my 11-0 on, and I go through my first of my little SuperDuos there. On goes an 11-0 and my 8-0. And we're going through the SuperDuo. On goes an 8-0 and an 11-0, so the opposite, through the SuperDuo. And then when I'm on this side here, I'm going to put on one of my 11-0s, and I'm going to pick up my diamond. And I pick up my diamond, and I'm getting through all of those beads. And just give it a little fold. That first one, once you get it through that first one, it's easy. It's just that first one that you gotta kind of move out of the way. And then you can go up the line. So I usually go up 4 and then down the 3 because you have 5 total on each side. Or I'm sorry, 7 total on each side. Then I'm gonna go down and come out right after my seed beads. So that's starting to decorate the right-hand side. And what I'll do is I'll jump over it and do the same thing on my left-hand side. So again on the left, which is now my right, because I prefer to seed bead with my right hand, the first flower is the only one that's going to have enough room here to have my 11-0 and then my 8-0 next to it. After that, on the ends, I'm just going to have an 11-0. So on goes an 11-0 and an 8-0, and this is just my same pattern next to the SuperDuo here. Give a nice little tight pull, and that'll kind of pull them in place. On goes an 8-0 and an 11-0. That keeps the 8-0s right at the top. And then here in this little space, we're going to add an 11-0, and I'm going to pick up my little diamond here on the side. And I'm going to sew through that and then down to start that same pattern on the opposite side. So I've decided to keep going with the one side, and just to show you as I get to the end here, when we come to the end and I'm going along my last row of open SuperDuos here, I have my 11-0 that I put on, and then my 11-0 and my 8, and then my 8 and my 11-0, and then this is the only place where I'm coming out and I'm putting an 8 and an 11-0. All the other ones I'm just putting the 11-0 on the side. What you're going to do then also is go up through the 2 seed beads and come out your 8-0 at the end there. And that's going to decorate this one whole side of your project. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to get ready to decorate my whole other side of my project. I got it started, but I need to finish it up. Just a little hint as I'm working with this one. If you have trouble going back through the seed bead next to the SuperDuo when you're here on the sides, what you can actually do is just skip that seed bead and go through the 5 seed beads that you added, because there's a total of 7 seed beads. So what you could do is just skip that one, go up 2, through the 1, down 2, and come out. You may need to put 2 seed beads then in place, or you can put an 8-0 and an 11-0 in place as well if you have trouble catching on to that 11-0 right there. Usually you can catch on to the 11-0, come out near the top of the Montee, and then go up the beads on the side. Going down on the side then is not bad, but sometimes it's hard to catch on to that 11-0. And again, if you do have trouble, just skip it and add an 11-0, 2 11-0s, or an 11-0 and an 8-0, and that will fill in that place there. When you get to the sides again, the pattern is the 11 on the side, and then you do your 11-8, and then 8-11. Come out the side here and put my 11 on, and then grab onto that bead. Once I grab onto that bead then and get in between there, I'm going to go up my row to the side here and create my little beads on the side. Again, as I get to the end, the 11-0 goes on, and then my 11-8, and then my 8-11. And then as I get to the end, I do decorate the color a little bit, and because I'm not going into a next design, you can see here we do another 8 and an 11. And again, that's the only time we do is at the start and the end. I'm going to go up through my 2 seed beads, up through my 8-0 bead, and that's where my other thread is coming out of. When I'm going up through my 8-0 here, I'm pushing through. With this needle, what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to retrace my clasp one more time. So the first needle that I completed is just hanging out there. This one here, I'm going to go up through my seed beads, up through my clasp, down through my seed beads on the other side, and then right when I come out of those seed beads, I'm going to be right next to the 8, which is where my other thread is ending. I'm going to take my needles off of my project, grab my 2 thread ends here, I'm going to do a square knot, right over left and left over right. I switch hands when I'm doing that because I'm not good at the whole right over left thing. I just want to make sure both knots get right in there. I'm going to do a third knot just for good measure. Then I do a little dab of glue. And the glue that I prefer is SuperDuo glue. You don't want to use an E6000 or something like that in heavy adhesive because you don't need that heavy adhesive. It's going to take forever to dry. And with the SuperDuo glue, it dries really quickly. I'm just going to drop a tiny little dab on. I don't even squeeze it at all. I just drop it on. What you can also do is just take your bead mat there, touch it to it so that way any extra glue gets on there. Let it dry for a couple seconds, and then you're going to trim off your thread ends, or you can burn them too. Once you have your thread ends all burnt, you have your bracelet done. It's a nice variety of doing the little Montees here along with some 6mm beads. It looks great on the wrist. It's not a super wide bracelet, which is nice because you can wear it more often and it's not going to be a bother on your wrist. I wouldn't make this one doubly as wide though. It's just going to make it kind of obnoxious. So it's a nice single strand bracelet, or a single bracelet that you can wear by itself. I used again the toggle clasp just to make it on and easy. You can see it can go up pretty far on my wrist because I did that extra Montee. But this is a nice standard size bracelet using that amethyst Montee and that luster 6.0. It really sits up nicely. And this one again I use the jonquil, and that gives it a nice look as well. So here you can see the two right next to one another, the two little pieces, and it really does give different design depending on which colors you picked. On the example here I put some yellow seed beads in as well rather than just all silver, just to kind of make it pop a little bit. So depending on what you use, you're going to get a different color variety and you're going to get a different look to it as well. You can pop a Swarovski crystal in the middle. A bicone would work as well, so you don't necessarily need a round. So hopefully you get a chance to get some of these new Montees in the SS20 in all different colors, play around with them, and play around with this little floral design as well. You can add any sort of clasp to it that you want. You can also check out other videos like this one and other video examples on our YouTube page. If you need some supplies, check out PotomacBeads.com. Go to our locations page and visit the great bead store nearest you. If you can't get to one of our stores, you can always shop online at thebeadco.com. The link for the materials for those items will be below in the description as well, so when you're watching and you're making, if you're wondering exactly what we're using, check out that link and you can get your supplies. Thanks a lot for watching and happy beading!